Hello everyone, and welcome to my latest video in my Analysing a Movie Scene series, where I'll be breaking down one of my favourite scenes of all time, that being the Omaha beach sequence in Saving Private Ryan. Before I dive into my analysis, let's do a quick summary of the plot. So the plot follows a group of soldiers led by Captain John Miller, played by Tom Hanks, as they attempt to find Private James Francis Ryan during Nazi-occupied France in World War II. During the Normandy invasion, we see American soldiers attempting to thwart the German army at the start of the movie. Straight out of the gate, as the Omaha beach scene begins, there's a ground-level filmmaking approach involved. This is in terms of director Steven Spielberg and cinematographer Janusz Kaminski opting for eye-level shots and avoiding grand, sweeping camera movements. This gives the action a realistic sensibility and allows the audience to be placed in the middle of this battle. The early shots of the soldiers throwing up on the boat, possibly due to seasickness or the fear of what they're going up against, creates a tension from the get-go. Spielberg's intentions for the scene are very clear early on, especially with the shots of the faces on the various soldiers, to let us know that the violence is not what's important, but the lives that are being risked to essentially save Western civilization from oblivion. As the front of the boat is flipped open, we see multiple bullets going towards the American soldiers, as the audience is plunged into the horror of this battle. An important fact to note for this scene is how we never see the Nazis' faces, with only a behind POV camera angle being deployed. This is a deliberate choice, it seems, to not show the enemy as human beings, but as evil personas that are as far removed as what would be considered human. The sound design from Gary Rydstrom is something to behold. The sound of the bullets ricocheting off the water and into the soldiers' bodies adds to the movie's realistic tone. Rydstrom has talked about the movie since its release, saying he wanted the sound design to be placed from the perspective of the soldiers and not the battle itself.
This is Foley, sound effects of equipment, footsteps, and sand. These sounds are as important to me as the dialogue because this scene is about the experience of a soldier.
Even prior to me listening to this interview, I'm glad to say this was one of my takeaways while I rewatched the scene. From a visual standpoint, the endless waves of bodies on the beach shows how much of an uphill task the soldiers faced on that fateful day. The handheld camera work creates a documentary-style feel to the movie, making the audience feel as if they're in and amongst the action. From an acting standpoint, the actors really have to sell the idea of being in a war zone, mainly through their facial expressions and body language. Whilst actors like Tom Hanks and Tom Sizemore do have lines of dialogue in the scene, it's in their acting abilities that I mentioned where we truly get to appreciate the fear that these characters are experiencing. This is perhaps best shown in the slow motion moment that Tom Hanks has, where his character essentially is at a standstill with himself, where he absorbs the chaos surrounding him. I also like how, where one of the soldiers is talking to Hanks' character, the audio becomes muffled, which really hits home the confused state that he's going through. I love how the camera vibrates every time there's an explosion on screen, which I thought was quite refreshing, given how a lot of war movies tend to show countless explosions, which often doesn't add dramatic weight to a scene. The horrific shot of the soldier holding his bloody guts, spilling out of his body, as he's screaming "Mama," shows us that these soldiers were not infallible, as they were thrown into a scenario that, for many, ended in their fate being sealed. This even extends to when Tom Hanks is dragging the blown-up soldier's body across the beach, as the shot of his face encompasses that even captains of armies were as human as you and I. In terms of the colour palette, Spielberg and Kaminski went for a muted grey tone throughout the scene. While the scene was not shot in black and white, the scene harkens back to the World War II era of movies, just from an aesthetic point of view. I also liked how the scene shows the strategy that goes into a battlefield. Case in point, when Hanks uses a mirror to see where his enemy is placed at the top of a hill, I thought this was a nice touch from Spielberg to show how soldiers use their ingenuity to outsmart their opponent. The final shot of Hanks' character, as the camera zooms into his eyes, where he mentions the view from the beach from where he's standing, perfectly captures the horror that these soldiers have been through. So those are my thoughts on the Omaha beach scene from Saving Private Ryan. Here's a summary of what I deciphered from this scene. Firstly, the ground-level filmmaking approach to the scene gives the action a realistic sensibility. Spielberg's intentions for the scene are clear in that the violence is not what's important, but the lives that are being risked. The sound design is one of the standout elements of this scene, as it shows the action from the perspective of the soldiers and not the battle itself. The handheld camera work creates a documentary-style feel to the movie, making the audience feel as if they're right in amongst the action. From an acting standpoint, the actors have to sell the idea of being in a war zone, mainly through their facial expressions and body language, which they all do wonderfully. In terms of the colour palette, Spielberg and Kaminsky went for a muted grey tone throughout the scene. While it was not shot in black and white, the scene harkens back to the World War II era of movies from an aesthetic point of view. I'd now love to hear your thoughts of the scene down in the comment section below, as I want to know what are some of the filmmaking elements that stood out to you. Thank you for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.